Hello everyone and welcome to this revolutionary online meetup. Thank you to the organizers for making this work and creating this cool online platform. My name is Roman Sandler. I am a front-end web developer right here from Tel Aviv, Israel. I work for 500 Tech, which is a front-end web development consultancy, also based right here in Israel. And today, I want to talk to you about how you can compose these single-purpose, small utility classes to style your React applications. So let's dive right in. All right. So today we're going to talk about a library called Tailwind Css. It's a library created by a guy called Adam Wathan, and as you can see, it gives you, instead of your traditional semantic class names, it gives you a bunch of these small little functional class names that are basically mapped to one CSS property. For example, class named Flex is mapped to display Flex. So I have went ahead and picked this neat little pricing card section from a product called Tailwind UI. And today we're going to take a look at how we can implement this little feature using Tailwind CSS and utility classes in a real cool, fast, intuitive, and most importantly, fun way. All right, so I went ahead and created this, vanilla create React app and set up basically all the markup required, all the components required to get that cool little pricing card UI that you saw here, already baked in the information. And basically what we can see here is like the raw markup unstyled. And together we're going to apply the classes using Tailwind CSS to get that cool pricing card section that we saw before. So without further ado, this is our app.js component that you all know and love. And basically, I've went ahead and let me just bump up the font size here. All right, so basically I've went ahead and created three of these pricing card components, and hold on, let me make this a little bit bigger. Is this good? All right, so I went ahead and made three of these pricing card components, right? And basically, if you look at the pricing card component right here, you see it's basically just markup. We're not going to focus, if it's on HTML and if we're using the right HTML tags and if it's accessible and everything like that, that doesn't matter. But basically we have this like naked unstyled markup that spits out that little sort of naked section that you saw there. So in order to get started, right, if we look at this pricing section, if we look at a specific pricing card, right, the first thing that jumps out to my eyes is that the card basically has this like white background, right? So Tailwind provides a bunch of utilities for styling background color. So if you go to the docs here and click on background color, you can see all the utilities that are available to you in order to apply background color. And you can see BG white maps to background color FFF, right? So that's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to go right here to this top div and we're going to say BG white, save that, and let's see what happens. If we reload this page, all right, we see we have our white background. What's next? So if I look at this again, at this card, the second thing that comes to mind is these rounded corners, right? So if if I go back to the code and I apply the class rounded, right, I'll get rounded corners. You can see even in my editor right here, rounded maps to border radius of 0.25 rems, right? So we want something a little bigger, so we're going to do rounded LG, right? And this sort of pattern of seeing of the scale of having like SM, MD, LG repeats itself in different categories of Tailwind UI. So as you can see here, we got those rounded corners that easily, right? So next thing that I can see here is this card component has some shadow behind it, right? So once again, if you go to the Tailwind docs, right, you can go box shadow, and boom, you get all the utilities, right, for all the available box shadows Tailwind provides. You can even take a look down here at these examples, right? So shadow XS is the smallest shadow possible, and shadow 2XL is like the biggest, widest shadow available. I think for us, this shadow LG shadow will do just fine, right? All right, so we'll just go back here and we'll do shadow LG, right? Take a look, bam, we get that shadow right out of the box. So I think that for now this is fine for the general card, and we can dive into this sort of like header section that you can see right down here beneath the most popular thing that you see right there, all right? So if I go to this div right here, the first thing that comes to mind is that we need a little padding, right? So padding in Tailwind basically starts with a P, right? Then a dash, and then a number, right? So let's say 8. And you can see here that P8 maps to padding 2 rems, right? And that sounds fine to me. If I go back to my React app, I see, there we go, I get some padding out of the box. The next thing I want to do is I want to center this text right that we see right here, right? The growth, the price, everything here needs to be centered, all right? So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to use Flexbox. So I can apply the class flex, right, which maps to display flex, and then I want to justify the content to the center, right? So I'm going to do justify center, right? And then I want to align the items also to the center. So I'm going to do items center. And I think by now you're starting to get the trick, right? I mean, how everything works. So I'm going to try and speed up a little bit, right? And try and catch you guys up along the way, all right? So we see here that now everything is in one row. We don't want that. We want that in a column, right? So we can just go ahead right here and apply flex call. And that will map to flex direction column, right? Save that. Bam. We get a column, right? I think at this point we can move on to each individual element, right? So let's take on this Ch3 header, all right? So looking at the mock-up we see here, it needs to be a little bit bigger, right? So let's try and give it a bigger font size. So we can do it with a utility called text, right, dash, and then I think I'm going to go real big here and do 5XL, all right? You can see it maps to a font size of 3 rems, sorry. Right, so this is really big, so we're going to tone it down a little bit, right? So we're going to do, instead of 5XL, we're going to do 2XL, all right? And this seems more like it, right? But the font needs to be a little bit beefier, right? A little fatter. So we're going to apply a utility, right, called font semi-bold, which maps to a font weight of 600, which I think is exactly what we want, and it seems so, all right? Let's move on to the next element, the little price section that you see down here, all right? So the first thing that we're going to do, right, is we're going to apply to this P element another flex right here, right, to make it a flex container. And then by default, I want to align the items to the center. All right. The next thing I want to do, I want to address this little money sign right here. So first of all, I want to make it a little bit bigger, right? So we're going to do it again with like text. Let's do LG for starters, and we'll see how that works out for us. And then for the price one, we want to really go big, because if you look here, the price is really, really big, right? So we're going to go with text 5 XL, right? And we're going to make the font semi-bold again, but we can do bold, light, whatever. We're going to go with bold, right? With semi-bold again. Let's take a look at what we have. All right, looks like we're moving in the right direction. So for the last one, we're just going to do, I think we're going to keep the font size the same at the base level, which is 16 pixels. But as you can see, we need it to be a little bit of a lighter gray, right? So we're going to do text gray, right? And then we need to pick a number. So let's say 600. Sounds fine to me. All right, so let's take a look. And that seems pretty okay. The only thing that we're missing now is basically a little bit of space from the month, a little bit of space from the dollar sign, and we need to align the dollar sign properly to the price. So first of all, I'm gonna give some left margin to this month text. All right, so I'm gonna do ML, which stands for margin left, right? And let's say 1. All right, like 0.25 rems, right? Let's see how that looks. That seems pretty fine to me. Let's do the same thing for the dollar sign right here. Let's do MR1, right? Like margin right 1. And basically the only thing that we have left, right, is to align that dollar sign. So let's see. The first thing that comes to mind, right, is to have the dollar self-align itself to the top, instead of allowing the parent to decide how it's going to be aligned, right? So let's do self, right, start, which maps to align self to the start, right? But for some reason that does not work for us. And the reason why that doesn't work is because of line height, right? Because we gave the font because the font is really big, the line height is also really big, right? So a nice little utility we can use here is basically letting none, right? Which maps to line height 1. So it's basically going to be the same size as the text, right? So if we do that, bam, everything works out great for us. So now I think this is pretty similar, right? We're not trying to focus on making this pixel perfect, right? We just want to get the ball rolling, and we want to get as much of a good result in a quick amount of time and pretty easily, right? So the only thing I see here is that the dollar sign is a little too small, right? So we're gonna bump up the font size right here from text LG to text XL, and see if that looks any better for us. And I would even give it a 2XL, right? So you'll be the judge. I think it's pretty similar, looks pretty cool to me. So moving on to the bottom section, all right? So I have the div right here, and the first thing that comes to mind is it has a gray background, right? So we already know how to do that. We do BG, right, gray, and I'm just going to use the 100, right, which is the lightest color. And this looks great, right? Looks exactly what we want. And next thing, I want to get some padding going, all right? So I think I'm going to use the same padding for the top one, right? So let's do P, like we already know how, and then dash, and also use 8, right? So that's going to give us the same amount of padding, which looks great. The next thing I think we need to do is get that top border, all right? And Tailwind provides a real easy way to do that too. So if I want to get a top border, right? So I'm going to do border, right? And then I want to do dash and T, right? For border top width 1 pixel. But that's not going to give me any color, right? So I want to specify the color of the border, right? Which will be border, color. Yeah, it's supposed to be border color. Oh, sorry. It's going to be I'm forgetting the utility for the border color, excuse me. So we're going to do border color. Go right ahead for the docs, right? Yeah, sorry. So it's going to be border gray. And the color we want to get here is 200, right? So looking at this looks exactly what we need, right? So moving on, I want to get that, I want to get those features, right? I want to get that text for the features. So I'm going to go to this span right here, and I'm going to apply, first of all, I want to get the text a little bit smaller, right? So I'm going to do text, let's try SM, all right? Then I want to make it gray, right? So I'm going to do text, gray, and let's say 500. Seems fine to me. Let's see. And yeah, maybe a little bit darker than 500, so we can go 600, right? Next thing we want to do is we want to get some margin between each line over there, right? So we're going to do margin top, right? And let's do 3 and see how that works out for us. All right, so looking at this seems fine, but I see that the text wraps right around, and I don't want that, right? I want each feature to have its own line, and I want it to truncate basically if it's too long. So a neat little utility I can use that comes from Tailwind is called truncate, right? Which is sort of rare in Tailwind because it has, as you can see here, right here in my editor, it combines a few classes together. So we get overflow hidden, text overflow ellipsis, and white space no wrap, right? But it's very, very functional. So if I put that over there, right, we see that it starts, we see that basically it doesn't wrap, right? So the next thing I want to do is I want to get that little check that you see right here. I've went ahead and already imported a SVG component that does that. I'm just going to put it right here, and we get it. But we want to have this thing in one line, right? So we're just going to use Flexbox again. So we're going to do flex, and we're items center like we have so far, right? And now everything is in one line. It truncates properly. Everything seems sweet. The only thing that we need to do, right, is get a little bit margin from that feature to the checks, to the green check, right? So I'm just going to go right here on that span and do margin left, let's say 2. Let's see how that looks. So yeah, maybe a little bit more. Let's go to 3. Seems awesome, all right? So I think from this point, we can go ahead and move on to the button component. But one thing we have to take care of before we do that, you see how we suddenly lost our rounded corners down here? That's because the div that's on top of it, on top of the div that's on the bottom, right, gets a color and his corners are not rounded. That's why we need to do it for the other div also, right? So I'm going to go right here and I'm going to specify, right, that I want to get rounded, but this time just for the bottom, right? So rounded bottom, LG. And that's going to put us right back where we started, where all the corners are rounded. So let's move on to dealing with that button, all right? So I go down to the button, so the first thing that comes to mind is it needs a little bit of margin from the feature section, right? So we're going to do margin top, and let's give it a big one, right? It needs to be like at least a 12, right? Let's see how that looks. Yeah, that seems a little much. Let's go down to 10, right? And this seems great, all right? It seems pretty much where we want it to be. So now let's think about how this button is going to look like, and we're going to stay right here in the editor, right? So it needs to have a BG color, right? A background color of a color that Tailwind refers to as indigo, right? That purple color that you saw over there is called indigo, right? So we're gonna go ahead and do BG indigo, right? 600. And we also need rounded corners for this button, right? So we're going to do rounded LG for all the button, right? And we are also going to make it width full, right? So we're going to do W-full for width full, and let's see what we have. All right, so we're in the right direction. So I see here we need a little vertical padding, and also we need the text color to be basically, if you look here, it's the lightest indigo color, all right? So go back here, we need a little padding on the y-axis, right? And it's gonna be, let's say 3, right? The other thing we need is text indigo 100. Let's see what we get. All right, this seems more like it. This seems like we're going in the right direction. So another thing I noticed right here is that the text is a little bit bigger, and it also has a subtle shadow, a solid box shadow right behind it. All right, so let's make the text a little bit bigger. Let's make it XL, and we want to give it a shadow, a real subtle shadow, and we'll use shadow MD. So this looks perfect to me, right? This looks awesome. But now you can see we're kind of in a predicament, right? Because only the middle one, right, is supposed to have that primary button, right? The other ones need to have a different type of button. So right here we need to basically use this popular boolean, right, to tell us whether or not we are the main card or not, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take all of these classes and I'm going to use a library called class names, all right? And basically I'm going to give it all of these classes. So I'm going to try and leave the classes that will always apply to this button, right? But take away the classes that are specific to a primary button. So for example, this one, right, the background indigo, and basically this one, the text 100, right? So we're going to take away these ones, and then we're just going to copy them, and we're going to tell class names here, takes an object, we're going to say, you know what, you're going to apply these classes only if, right, this is the popular card. If it isn't the popular card, right, we want to apply something else. We want to say the background color is white and the text is indigo 600, right? Basically inverted. So, and we're going to say this will only apply if it's not the popular one. So let's see what we get right here. Perfect. Seems like exactly what we're looking for, right? So next thing, right, we see that the two cards on the sides sort of go in, right, sort of go in behind that main card. If we look at it right now, we see that by default, the last card becomes the on top, right? So we can fix that real easy, right? All we need to do is go to our app.js component, right? And just go right here to the main one and say that this one has a Z index, and that's going to fix our problems, right? Bam, we have that. So now, as you can see, we just need the two cards on the side to just go in behind the middle card just a little bit, right? So we're going to go to this one, right, on the right, basically, and we say, I want a negative margin left, right, of 2. And I'm going to go to the one on the left. I'm going to say I want a negative margin of right 2, right? A negative margin right of 2. Bam, we get exactly what we wanted, right? And now we're looking pretty great. The only thing that we're missing so far is the only thing that we're missing at this point, right, is that most popular sort of halo that we see here. All right, so let's try and tackle that one. So if I'll jump back to the pricing card component, bump up the font size a little bigger again. So let's start off with a border, all right? So going back to the same technique that we used before, all right? We're going to extract out these classes, right, because they're common. And we're just going to provide them right here. And basically, we're going to say this div is going to get those classes always, right? So now we want to say what classes are conditional, basically. So conditionally, right, we want to provide a border, right? Let's make it a bit thicker, which is 2, right? And we want to say that the border is going to have the color indigo 600, right? So it's going to be border indigo 600, right? And that's only going to apply if you're the popular card. And let's see what we get. And bam, that's exactly what we were looking for, right? So kind of the last thing we want to do here is that most popular kind of badge that you see right here. So I'm just going to go down here under this div, right? And I'm just going to say, you know what? If this is the popular card, right, I want to display this little div right here, all right? And inside this div, I want to have a span. And this span right here is going to have most popular, all right? So let's see that. All right, so it puts itself right here in the top left corner like we would expect. So let's think about this little pill here that we wanna make. All right, so what's going to happen here? We're going to have a background color of indigo 600 like we have so far, right? We're going to have a text of indigo 100 like we saw up until now. This time we want to have we want to see the corners rounded fully, right? So we're going to do rounded full, right? Which is going to do a border radius of 999 and always give us like a full pill. All right, let's see what we have so far. Great. So looking at this one right here, first of all, I see it's uppercase, right? And then we need a little padding on the sides, right? So we're just gonna go up here, right? And we're gonna say, all right, I want padding on the x-axis of, let's say, 3, all right? And I want to uppercase. Let's look at it now. Looks great. All right, so what we want to do now is basically absolutely position this div so it can go on top. So if I'm just going to do, right, absolute, sorry, I'm going to make this upper div relative first, right, and then I'm going to do absolute, and then I want to basically, I want to put it in the middle, right, so Tailwind gives us a utility called inset, right? Inset on the x-axis 0, so that's right 0 and left 0. Go ahead and do that, right? And that did not work because this needs to be also a flex container, right? And needs to justify that span to the center, and that works, right? So the only thing that we need now is a negative margin from the top, right, of, let's say, 3. Right? So basically, now it works, but it works because coincidentally, the font size aligns in this situation, right? But we see here the font size needs to be a little bit smaller. So if you go right here, and we make the font size, right? Let's do like text XS. Yeah, so basically now this is not aligned properly, and that's again because of the line height. So because Tailwind's scale is consistent, right? So if I have a margin top 3, that maps to 0.75 rems. So if I give this a letting, right, like line height of 6, right, which is 1.5 rems, so it's exactly twice as much, and it puts the pill right where it's supposed to be. All right, so looking at this and looking back at this, this looks pretty much done, right? I mean, I mean, this is not still production ready, and this is pretty naive, right? But we have been able to get this done in 25 minutes or so, right? Next thing I want to show you is, you're probably wondering to yourself, you're saying, all right, so for the button, right, am I going to repeat those classes everywhere in my application, right? Like everywhere I'm going to use a button, I'm going to repeat this line of classes? So no, Tailwind actually encourages you in situations like this, where you have a line of classes, right? You have multiple classes after each other that need to be repeated in multiple places in your application, which buttons are the prime example for. You can basically use a feature of Tailwind called apply, right? So I want to take this list of classes, right? I'm going to go to my index.css file right here, and I'm basically going to use a directive, right? A directive, this comes from post CSS. I'm not going to go into that, but you should look it up. So I'm going to do a directive called apply, right? And then I'm just going to spread all these classes right here. Sorry, I need to open curly braces. I'm going to do apply, and basically, sorry. Let me do this again. We're going to do, first of all, we need to say the class name that we want to append to, right? So it's going to be btn, right, which is going to be our base button class, and then we're just going to apply those classes, right? So then if I go to the pricing grid right here, to the pricing card again, right, I can just go ahead and, instead of using all these classes right here, just do btn, right? And we should get the exact same result. So we can do the same thing for these variants right here. So I'm going to copy these, go back here, and do like btn, let's say primary, right? And do again, apply. And then go back, and we do btn primary, right? And we're supposed to get the exact same result. Let's copy these ones too, and we'll do btn, let's say default. Right? And just apply. And we get the same result, right? So going back here, I'm going to do btn.default, right? And again, we're supposed to get the exact same result. So I think basically, right, if we look at this, hopefully what I want to try and show you guys, right, is that two things. First of all, looking at this code, right, we were able to basically not worry about trying to name things, right, or trying to decide whether this should be 15 pixels or 20 pixels, right? Tailwind provides us with a scale, right? It tells us you need to pick one of these values from this scale, and I think it gives us a lot of very, very good defaults. It just that you can just pick from, right? I mean, I didn't have to go ahead and go to this mock-up right here and start measuring the corners and seeing if it's 15 pixels or 20 pixels or whatever, I could just use the scale, right, that that Tailwind provides me to basically make real easy decisions. So what I want to give you a glimpse of next, right, is how you can customize Tailwind, because the whole premise of Tailwind, right, is that it wants to be as flexible as possible to enable you as a developer to basically compose these utilities to achieve any UI that you can dream of, right? So Tailwind basically wants to take in a configuration file that it's gonna basically compile using PostCSS and just spit out a CSS file with all the utilities, right, that are generated based on your configuration file. So jumping back to the editor right here, you can look at this Tailwind config.js, right? So basically, as you can see, right, this is just like a common JS module that exports a function, and you can see that has a ton of possibilities. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can have all your colors here, right? So for example, you see your grays, you see red, orange, yellow, and so on and so forth. Here's the indigo that we have been using, right? So if I decide that indigo 600, right, from now on it's just going to be red, right? So let's try and do this and see what happens. And sure enough, we get red, right? So you can imagine, you can specify whatever color you want or whatever color scale you want. These are just JavaScript objects. So you can change the colors, you can change the values, you can change the scale, you can do whatever you want. Tailwind just provides you with a really good default. Also, you see the spacing values, right? So you can imagine, you can space it any way you want to, any way your designer or your product manager decides the spacing needs to be, you can also do that, right? So we have everything: background color, background size, border radius, box shadows. Anything that Tailwind provides is customizable to the core, right? So basically, that's it. That's what I wanted to show you guys. I will share in the comments more resources that you can go ahead and take a look at, right? Of other basically the Tailwind ecosystem, which recently created this cool premium project that provides you, it's a premium paid product, right? But it provides you these sort of bootstrap style components, right? This a bit of like a higher level abstraction on top of Tailwind that will give you, you know, your cards, your forms, your whatever you want, even entire page sections, right? So that's it. Thank you very much.